Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. Today, my discussion point, I'm calling it boundaries. And yes, I know, it's a bit of a weird name for a topic, isn't it? But it's something that can have a really big impact on not just your productivity, but also your life. Boundaries, it's about knowing what you can do. It's about knowing when you can say no, or knowing when you can even say yes, but without the boundaries in place, your life will it becomes swamped. It's all about understanding the time you've got available, the energy that you've got available, about knowing your skills. There's so much goes into the boundaries, and it's why it's such a key topic to really think about. If we're able to understand what we're doing, if we're able to understand when we can say no, it helps us really to control the flow of work coming in, to control our energy, and, to a limited extent, control our time in as much as anybody's able to control their time. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're a bookkeeper. One of your clients comes to you and says, look, I'm having this HR problem. Can you help me out? You're a bookkeeper. You're not a HR expert. You've got very little knowledge of HR, of the processes, of even the legalities involved in it. You know you can't handle a HR issue, but you want to be helpful. So what do? Let's say you decide to say yes, and you try and solve this HR issue. Well, sounds good, doesn't it? But what happens if you go about it in the wrong way? What happens if you say the wrong things, if you don't do things in the right order? You can leave that person open to all sorts of legal problems. But if you say no, what are you going to look like? You're going to look as if you don't want to help. And yes, I know this is a really daft example, but I'll bet you it's happened somewhere. So in this scenario, what are you going to do? You're going to set your boundaries. You're going to say to them, I'm a bookkeeper. If you're employed, it's easy. You've got this lovely thing called a job description that says what you're there to do. If it's not in your job description, then you have the ability to say no. We'll get onto the dangers of that in a second. But what happens if you're working for yourself, like this freelance bookkeeper? How do you set that boundary? How do you stop yourself from doing things outside of really what your skills allow you to do? Let's look at another example. Again, I know it's a daft example. Imagine you're a plumber. You've just finished fixing a client's leaky tap. They're ever so pleased with the work you've done. They think it's marvellous. They then say to you, well, seeing as you're here, can you just go and run this electric cable for me and put a couple of plugs in over here? That's a job for an electrician, isn't it? Not for a plumber. What do? Do you say to them, yeah, I can do that? Then go and run that cable, install those plugs. 2 days later, it finds out that it's not been done properly, the regulations haven't been followed, and there was a fire. I know, as I say, daft example. But if you say no, well, you risk alienating that client, don't you? You risk making them think you're not willing to help. What you can do, though, is by understanding your boundary, you can say to them, I'm sorry, I'm not able to do electrical work because I'm a plumber. But I have this person in my contacts that I can put you in touch with, and they're a really good electrician. They'll be able to come and help you. So your boundary is saying, no, I can't do it. But it's also saying, but I know someone who can. So this is where understanding the boundaries, thinking about them beforehand, it can help you to grow your network. So you've got people that you can contact for anything that you need to have done. You know who to go to. You know who to direct people to. As I say, silly example, but the point is there. There's another two boundaries which we rarely think about. And these, it's around time and energy. Now, we often hear people saying about they work 9 till 5. I mean, Dolly Parton did a big song about it, didn't she? Have you ever known anyone who works 9 till 5? Because I certainly don't. I've never been able to find that person, and I do keep looking. In reality, we may be contracted to work 9 till 5, but we often do a lot more than that. We're at home, the phone rings from work. We still answer it, we still help them on the phone. We're working on something. We want to get it finished, so we just think to ourselves, oh, it's 5 o'clock. I'll just do an extra half an hour, I'll just do an extra hour just to get this finished. We get into the office half an hour early so we can spend time planning what we're going to do that day. We get the calls on the weekends, as I've mentioned. We get asked, can you come and do some overtime? We need to get this project delivered. Can you do a couple of hours on Wednesdays? Can you work at the weekend? That list of things, it just grows and grows. It's a constant drain on our time. And I know what it's like. I lived it. I wanted to be a good team player. I wanted to help out. I ended up working 17 hours a day. The only time I wasn't working, well, I was either travelling to work or I was asleep. But even when I was asleep, there was no rest because I'd just drop off. The phone would go with a quick question. I'd try and get more sleep, and guess what? That phone rings again. Most nights it would ring 4 or 5 times. I did not have a boundary set around my time. By not having that boundary, I was getting more and more tired. By not having that boundary, my productivity was severely impacted. I was working long hours, but I wasn't getting much done. But the most important thing, by not having that boundary, my personal life was suffering. I didn't have time for my family. I didn't have time to relax. I didn't have time to really think about what had been going on each day. But after 2 years, well, I just couldn't carry on like this. It was too much. My health, my life, and my work were all suffering because I wanted to help and I had no boundary. So what did I do? I put a boundary around my time. I set a limit of 10 hours per day and no working on weekends. Yes, I know 10 hours is still too much. And yes, not working on weekends. I'm not being a part of the team, am I? I also put rules for when people were calling me at night. So I said to them, this is what you've got to do. This is what I'll ask when you ring. If you haven't done it, then I will hang up straight away until you have done it. This was all about really putting the onus back on the people calling me to get them to think rather than taking the easy option and just call Gary. The impact, it shot me. In that 10 hours, I was doing more than I had in the 17. My productivity was boosted. The nighttime calls, they were reduced. My team, they grew in confidence, they grew in their own abilities. I was able to get more rest. So that is what partly led to that increase in productivity. I wasn't tired. I was able to do things with my family. I was able to do things with my friends. I was able to have a hobby. I was able to refresh and recharge my brain every evening and every weekend. That boosted my productivity. Now, we've got to be honest. You can't just say, I'm not going to do more than 10 hours. You can't just say, I'm not going to work weekends. You've got to be flexible. But by setting the boundaries and then by having a set of rules by which I would break those boundaries, it allowed me to take back control of my life. Here we've just talked about time, but it's a very similar story for energy. By working too much, you're not getting enough time for rest. By not resting, you're not recharging those internal batteries. Those internal batteries, they're what you drive you forward. If you don't have enough power, it's like not having enough power in a torch battery. It won't turn on. If you don't have enough energy inside yourself, well, your brain's not going to function. Your body's not going to function. It's all about balancing out that work and that life. And I'm going to touch on that in next week's video. By having boundaries, I was able to rest. I was able to recharge. I was able to boost my internal energy and boost my output. So in summary, set boundaries and stick to them. But make sure you're flexible. Make sure you've got rules around going outside of those boundaries. For me, working weekends, if we were getting really up against it, if there was nobody else who could do it, I'd say, yes, I'll work this weekend. But if I work this weekend, next week, I won't work anything over the 10 hours a day. People understood, my boss understood that, and they understood the reason why. By sticking to your boundaries, it allows you to focus on what you're doing. It allows you to recharge your energy. It allows you to get the rest and relaxation that you need. And that then builds on your concentration, it builds on your focus, it lets you deliver the results you deserve. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. What are your thoughts on boundaries? Do you have any boundaries? What are they? Why not drop a comment down below? Let's kickstart the conversation. Please hit the thumbs up button. Every time you like, every time you comment, just helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.